Once upon a time, in a village nestled between lush green mountains and a wide, winding river, there lived a humble blacksmith named Aemon. He wasn't rich, nor famous, but his heart was known to be as pure as gold. Aemon was the kind of man who would help anyone in need, whether it was fixing a broken cartwheel or sharing a loaf of bread with someone who had none. His reputation for kindness spread far and wide, but there was one thing that set him apart from everyone else in the village: Aemon never asked for anything in return. His heart, as the villagers often said, was a treasure, and his generosity knew no bounds. One crisp autumn evening, as the sun began to dip behind the mountains, a stranger arrived in the village. She was a woman of striking beauty, with dark eyes that seemed to pierce right through people. She wore fine clothes, far more extravagant than anything the villagers had ever seen. When she walked into the village square, people stopped in their tracks, their conversations stilled by her presence. The woman approached Aemon's blacksmith shop and, without a word, knocked on the door. Aemon, who was hammering a piece of iron at the anvil, looked up and saw her standing there. Without hesitation, he put down his tools and welcomed her in, as he always did for anyone who crossed his path. "Good evening, traveler. How can I assist you?" he asked with a warm smile. The woman stepped forward, her eyes scanning the humble workshop filled with tools and half-finished pieces of metal. "I've heard tales of your kindness, blacksmith," she said in a voice that was both smooth and cold. "They say you possess a heart of gold. I wonder, though, if your heart is truly as pure as they say. I have a task for you, something that will test whether you are truly as noble as they claim." Aemon raised an eyebrow but didn't hesitate. "If I can help, I will. What is it you need?" The woman smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "I need you to make a choice, a difficult one. There is a treasure hidden deep within the forest, guarded by dangerous creatures. It is said to be a treasure of unimaginable wealth, one that would make even the wealthiest kings envious. However, there is a price. The treasure cannot be obtained without a sacrifice. If you retrieve it for me, I will reward you beyond your wildest dreams. But if you refuse, you will have nothing." Aemon frowned. He had heard stories of treasure hunts and dangerous quests, but this felt different. There was something unsettling in the woman's words, a shadow that lingered in the air. But his nature was one of kindness, and though he didn't trust her entirely, he couldn't refuse a plea for help. "I will go," he said simply. "But tell me, why do you seek this treasure? What will you do with it once you have it?" The woman's smile widened, but again, it lacked any warmth. "That is none of your concern. Do as I ask, and your reward will be beyond anything you could ever imagine." And so, Aemon set out the very next morning, venturing into the dark forest. The trees loomed tall and thick, their branches intertwining to block out the sun. Strange sounds echoed through the air, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of an owl. Aemon walked carefully, keeping his wits about him. He knew the forest was known for its dangers, but he was determined to honor his promise. Hours passed, and the further he went, the more he felt the weight of the forest's secrets pressing down on him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he reached a clearing. In the center was an ancient stone pedestal, and atop it sat a chest. It was made of wood and iron, its surface covered in intricate carvings that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Aemon approached cautiously, his hand reaching for the chest. But just as his fingers brushed the surface, a voice echoed from the trees. It was deep, ancient, and full of warning. "Who dares disturb the treasure of the forest?" it boomed. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything Aemon had ever seen. It was a massive wolf, its fur silver and glowing, its eyes burning like embers. The creature stepped forward, its gaze fixed on Aemon. "I seek the treasure," Aemon said, his voice steady but respectful. "I was sent to retrieve it." The wolf growled low, its teeth bared. "This treasure comes at a cost. To claim it, you must sacrifice something that you hold dear. If you refuse, you will never leave this forest." Aemon's heart raced. He had heard of such curses, but he had never believed they were real. The wolf's words echoed in his mind, "Sacrifice something you hold dear." Aemon stood still for a long moment, considering his options. He had a family back home, people who loved him, people who depended on him. He thought of the woman who had sent him on this quest. Was she testing him? Or was this truly the price he had to pay for the treasure? His thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of doubt and uncertainty. But then, something in his heart spoke clearly to him. He understood that the treasure was not meant for him. It was a test, not of his bravery or skill, but of his heart. He had always lived his life helping others without expecting anything in return. Why should this quest be any different? I refuse, Aemon said, his voice calm and resolute. I will not sacrifice anything I hold dear for wealth or power. If this treasure requires such a price, then I have no use for it. The wolf's eyes narrowed, but there was a flicker of approval in them. You have passed the test, Aemon the blacksmith, the creature said. You have chosen wisely. The treasure is not meant for those who seek it out of greed or desire for power. It is meant for those whose hearts are pure. With that, the wolf disappeared into the shadows, and the chest on the pedestal opened by itself, revealing nothing but a single golden coin. Aemon returned to the village, his heart light, though his hands were empty. The woman who had sent him waited for him at the edge of the village, her face twisted in disappointment. You returned empty-handed, she said coldly. I see you have learned nothing. Aemon looked at her kindly. I have learned much. The greatest treasure is not gold or jewels, but the purity of the heart. I refuse to sacrifice what matters most to me for something that would have taken away my integrity. The woman's face darkened, but Aemon could see the faintest hint of respect in her eyes. She vanished into the wind, never to be seen again. From that day forward, the village spoke of Aemon not just as a kind blacksmith, but as a man whose heart was truly golden, for he had passed the greatest test of all, the test of character. And so, Aemon lived out his days in peace, knowing that the wealth of the world could never compare to the riches he had found in the purity of his heart. His story became a legend in the village, one passed down for generations, a reminder that the greatest treasure is not what we seek in the world, but what we hold within ourselves. Moral of the story. True wealth is found not in material possessions, but in the purity of one's heart and the choices made in the face of temptation.